I'm with Xcel Energy. I'm a field representative, and I work in our mid-market on the business side of things. So with our business customers, and essentially in the state of Minnesota, in that pretty much involves all businesses that are like not 3M. I mean, that don't have a direct or dedicated account rep. I work with those customers to engage in and participate in our energy efficiency programs and demand response programs. So that's what I do all day. There are a lot of similarities between business, conservation opportunities and home or residential opportunities. And, I do a fair amount of work too in multifamily residential. So I'm quite familiar with a lot of the different opportunities that exist in a wide variety of types of buildings and operations. So although I'm not directly involved in the residential programs per se, so I may not be as fluent. And if you have specific questions about specific residential programs, I may have to beg to address those offline and and get you some information, after the presentation to be specific. But I say there are quite a number of areas that overlap between businesses and residential in the energy efficiency world, and we'll talk a bit about those as we go here. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Mark. Just real briefly, and I, gosh, I'm going to try to put a clock on here too, so I don't flap my gums for too long here on any one of these things. We talked a little about an introduction. I would say, I'll tell you a little bit about Xcel Energy. We will breeze through some of that very quickly, but I think it's noteworthy just because there's so many changes that are happening here in our world in the utility space with the clean energy transition. I think it's just there's some interesting information, some facts and context that'll help you there that I just wanted to present. Then we'll talk about the efficiency, and we're going to put a little bit at the end on demand response again, because it's a growing concern for us, and it's one of those areas that sort of new. Its importance is increasing as we continue to make the clean energy transition, and we'll explain that as we go here further as well. I would invite you, because we're kind of, it's just more like a conversation than a presentation here. And I know we're being recorded, so maybe others aren't going to be able to ask the questions they want, but they can always get in touch with us after, and my contact information and our contact information is presented at the end here. But I think anybody, if you have any questions along the way here as I'm going through this, feel free to just pipe up and ask, if I'm not being clear, or if something just comes to mind, and I'll do my best to address those. Okay, the next slide, Mark. Xcel Energy. Maybe some of you might remember back in the days when we were NSP, Northern States Power in Minnesota here. I remember that, so I'm getting older. But anyhow, we've grown quite a lot. We now have presence in 8 states. And you can kind of see the graphic there. We pride ourselves in a number of areas as leaders, and the clean energy transition is one of them. We'll talk a little more about that, our wind and solar investments. Energy efficiency is another one where we actually, in Minnesota here, we develop and administer our own efficiency programs. So we have, I think, a very robust offering, more so than many utilities. And we can work with our customers in a large variety of ways to partner, to incent and to essentially influence and encourage energy efficiency. The next slide, Mark. Mark, if you can go, yeah, there you go. Okay, just a little lag there. Our carbon-free future. This is something that we have been publicizing, and we're proud of. We're leading sort of the pack in the pace of conversion here to the carbon-free future. We're looking at at climate change and trying to do our part in not hastening that. We all want to be good stewards, and I think certainly power generation is one area where we need to lead the way. So we've set that 2050 vision to be 100% carbon free. Right now we're about 50% of the way there. This is Upper Midwest. The different service areas have sort of different mixes there. But maybe you can go to the next slide, Mark. I think we've got some more detail that actually it's the one after this. But let me talk here first about how we get there, that carbon-free futures. It's not something that we can just flip a switch and do. It's going to require lots of change. So we're in the process of that now. We're closing coal plants. We're not moving as fast as some people would like, and we're moving faster than other people would like. So it's a balancing act in a certain sense. The pace that we make that transition, is certainly influenced by all kinds of different things. Cost is among them. And we all none of us want to pay a whole lot more for our power if we can avoid it, and as long as we can avoid it. So, but we are in that on that path. So we're closing coal plants. We're adding renewables. We add a lot of wind, and we add solar as well in this area. But on the utility scale, we add more wind than solar. It makes sense for us. Wind and the utility scale doesn't make as much sense on a residential type of scale to use wind generation. But frankly, the wind blows more than the sun shines here in the Great White North. So that's why we're putting more of our investment in wind. Continuing carbon-free nuclear. I don't know if y'all are nuclear fans like I am. If you're not, I'm going to encourage you. I'd love to talk with you afterwards and see if I can change your minds. But nuclear is an important component right now of carbon-free power. It's a solid asset for us. It is it's called a base load, capability. So it doesn't matter whether the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. It's producing power. So it's a critical component of our plan to get to carbon-free in the future. Go to the next slide, Mark. Just real quick, I guess some of the power that you're getting now, and it's going to be growing, is coming from renewable assets, renewable generating resources. And there's information on our website that we're maintaining and updating called the certified renewable percentage that gives you information. I guess it gives you specific hard numbers as to what percentage the power that is being provided on the grid. This is just to everybody without subscribing to a special program to get more. If you're just a general regular customer, you're going to get a certain percentage of your power from renewable generating resources today. And you can see on the chart there, these are the kind of the projected figures for into the future. So that's just kind of an interesting point if you're keeping track, or if you really want to assign real numbers to the to what's on the grid. This is a way to do it, and I would encourage you to look more at that on our website. There's quite a lot of information. It's very interesting. Go ahead to the next slide, Mark. So here's our energy mix now and where we want to be by 2030. And you can see, I'm not going to spend too much time here, but you can see the coal plants are going away, and there's still some natural gas, even at the 2030. And that natural gas is, the leaping from natural gas to get 100% renewables. That's where the technology doesn't exist yet. Like, we need to have the ability to what's called peak to meet peak demands, to essentially turn on a power generating asset very quickly. And natural gas is one that we can do now. Doesn't matter if the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. We can use that to make up the gap. So that's going forward. That's still in our plan. And there's going to be questions around, well, what are you going to do to get rid of natural gas? And we can talk a little about that. We may not need to necessarily get rid of it entirely. There's ways to sequester the carbon, and there's other things that we can do to still kind of accomplish the same end. But anyhow, that's our plan and kind of where we're at with the clean energy mix today and going forward. Go to the next slide, Mark. Now we're getting into the kind of the bulk of the presentation, and I'm about 10 minutes in already, so I probably used too much time on the context. But it's interesting, and it's going to kind of something that we'll build on in a little bit more of this discussion. But energy efficiency is just one of those things where I get asked quite often, why are we interested in energy efficiency? As a power generating company that makes money selling and making power, well, it really wraps up and revolves around balancing the grid, the supply and the demand. And what energy efficiency programs do for us is they give us intelligence as to what our customers are going to be doing, what their plans are, what they're implementing, that's going to impact the demand, the amount of power that we need to provide. Go ahead. Somebody have a question? Nope. Well, yeah, just pipe up if you do.
Yeah, I think you're good. Just continue.
Okay. Say we have the energy efficiency programs that have essentially allowed us to avoid building more than 21 power plants since '92. So without that intelligence, we would essentially overbuild generating assets, and that's kind of what why it makes sense for us to have those. So you can go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about some specific energy efficiency offerings, and they come in a variety of areas. Now, some of these don't necessarily apply to residential, but most of them do. So, we've got to go through one at a time. Studies and assessments. I'm sorry here. We offer those to folks who really don't know where to start looking for conservation opportunities. So I know we have, say what's called ASHRAE level 1 audits that we offer to businesses. And I'm not sure if any of you, or if this, the audience in general that might be listening to this would be interested in the business side of things too, but that's where I spend most of my time. But where we offer the studies is to folks that need some help identifying potential opportunities for energy savings. And I'll tell you what, those things are going to always include 2 areas, no matter whether it's a residence or a business. And if we're a live audience, I would ask somebody to volunteer, if they know what those are. But just for the sake of the discussion here, it's lighting and air conditioning, or heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. Those are the 2, say very common areas of efficiency improvement that everybody, no matter what type of business or operation or home you have, there's opportunities to improve those things. So converting to LED is one, and many of us probably have already done that. The only places you don't want to change your light bulbs to LED are in those closets that you never go in, and where you never turn the light on. Is that those are the most efficient lights you've got, are the ones that are always off. Doesn't matter what type they are. But for the lights that you turn on and off, if you haven't converted to LED, you should, and that's a great way to save energy. On the air conditioning side, it's a little more complex. In the heating, we're talking about the loads on those systems and the type of, or the efficiency of the system themselves. We have rebates for new systems, obviously. If you buy a more efficient air conditioner, you get a rebate. If you buy a more efficient furnace, you get a rebate. But nobody will ever, well, not say nobody, but most people aren't going to change out their air conditioner or their furnace if it's working exclusively for the energy saving potential of the new system. It's just not financially, it doesn't make financial sense. The payback is So, the time to look at efficiency of your systems is when you're replacing them, your air conditioner or your furnace. And we have rebates around those. And the whole intent is to help encourage you to spend a few extra dollars to kind of to soften that blow a little bit, to reduce the premium, to get you into that next level of efficiency. But the other things that you can look at that maybe are less cost, that you can influence the performance of your systems, that's in your envelope. So those are your windows, your doors, your insulation of your roof and walls. It's a little bit more difficult in insulation. That's expensive to influence, but weather stripping and things like that to seal out unwanted air and exhaust infiltration. Those are things that you can do that will help your current system perform better. Essentially will reduce the load on that system and thereby will just reduce the cost of operating it. So those are, some of the things that they're very common. The studies will always have those in them. Typically, where we find the studies of most value is in the industrial and process loads, manufacturing facilities where there's all kinds of spinning motors and machines and things like that, where it gets a little more complicated, but there's much more opportunity in those areas. And sometimes those studies can be very beneficial to helping those folks, identify areas for improvement. Benchmarking is something, just comparing yourself to others. That's always helpful to see how you're doing. Or if you have more than one house, or if you're a landlord or whatever, and you want to look at how one building performs versus the others, it kind of helps you determine which one you ought to spend your time on. But so we have programs that help you with that. Prescriptive programs are just the rebate programs themselves that if you have a question to me, does this particular item have a rebate? I can answer that by looking on the application forms. Those are all on our website too, so you can self-serve to those. But I read them every day, so it's probably easier for me and my colleagues to help you with that if you have a question. But it's called a prescriptive program, where the rebates are published. The custom programs are rebates that where essentially anything that's not prescriptive, and typically we see those in manufacturing or industry. And then there's holistic programs, which are new construction. So we work often with developers and both industry and multifamily. So anybody building a new apartment building, as long as there's a common space, we have holistic rebate programs that essentially look at the plans and evaluate them and calculate rebates for everything that's qualified in the plan, and also provide information about options for upgrades and to optimize that efficiency. Does anybody have any questions at this point, or any specific efficiency programs that you might have a question about or want to talk about?
I was wondering how I could learn how efficient my house is and like the areas that I'm wasting specifically.
Sure. Sure. Well, I think as a resident, in a residential operation, I believe we have a program, either an audit program or a self-assessment.
Yeah. So I'm compared against my neighborhood people.
Sure.
What I'm wondering is there a way to find out like which of my walls are wasting?
Yes. Sure.
Yeah.
There are, yes. There's definitely audits that are available, and whether they're funded and to what extent, that's something I'd have to, direct us both to the website to learn. But there certainly there's technology, and there are instruments available, infrared thermometers and things like that, cameras rather,
Yeah.
that they'll use to identify areas where there's leakage and that type of thing. So yeah,
Okay.
to answer your question, kind of the short answer is yes, there certainly are very robust technological devices and tools and practices that can go into whatever level of detail you want. Really just a matter of cost.
Yeah, how do I
You know.
get a hold of that?
Well, I can, if you want to take it offline and drop me maybe an email
Sure.
or a text or whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that probably the best first place is our website to start with that. If you haven't been on to xcelenergy.com, it's pretty well organized. I think you can go through as in a residential customer, you can poke into the efficiency section of that, and it will tell you what our offerings are.
Okay.
And then, beside that, yeah, it's probably something to Google, because there are plenty of companies that'll do those types of, in-depth studies if you want
Okay.
something really deep. Yep.
And it's called an energy audit?
Yep, an energy audit, exactly.
Okay.
And Xcel Energy does participate with Centerpoint, and what's called the Home Energy Squad.
Yep.
And so for $100, they can come out and look at a variety of things with your house, actually touching on some of the things you touched on, Rachel.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Any other questions or?
Yeah, I had a question. So I recently had, my house is west facing.
Okay.
I recently had 2 large ash trees that were on the west side of my house be
Yep.
removed.
Yeah.
It just got me thinking, well, I don't know if I've noticed that big of an effect. I'm assuming there's some sort of effect because there's no more shade, but
Sure.
is there any potential for a program that Xcel Energy would do that is around like shade trees? Because with the emerald ash borer, there's going to be a lot less shade especially in Crystal, but just in neighborhoods in general.
It's a great question. And, we have had, I know in one of our holistic, our holistic new construction programs, we've looked at that as a measure, is strategic planting. The problem, say with that, there's a couple of issues. It's quantifying the energy saving potential from it.
Yeah.
It's difficult, and what we're talking about with rebates, we all pay into what's called the SIP fund, conservation improvement, what is it? Plan, or I forget the acronym, but it's it's part of in our bill when we pay Xcel Energy's bill or any power company's bill. It's like we're paying into the fund that is essentially tapped and used to pay rebates, used to develop the programs and to pay things out. So there's certain qualification requirements that the regulators have of those programs where they need to be cost effective and they need to benefit society. And, so there's all kinds of things that are used to determine the viability of a program. And though you're making a great point, and there's definitely some potential there for you. You're going to spend more money in solar heating and your air conditioning, because you've got more sun coming in through your windows. Now there's other ways you can mitigate that too, with either different tinted windows, but those are expensive to replace, or just shades and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
To keep the sun out. But it's a great way to think.
Yeah, on the flip side of it, it's probably worth something in the winter, so maybe balance it out. Like, it doesn't really matter that much in the end.
Well, yeah, it does. If you can use it in the winter and kind of prevent it in the summer, then you got the best situation. But yeah, that's a great point too. We have almost more winter than summer in this area. So
Right.
yeah, those kinds of, it's like the white roof thing. People ask about white roofs. Normally those are not on houses, they're on businesses. But white being a reflective material doesn't absorb the sun's energy and heat so much, so it reduces the building's need to cool. But it's good in the summer, but it's not so good in the winter, right? Because we could use the heat in the winter, and we got a lot of winter around here, so it's not a measure that makes as much sense here as it does, say, in Texas or Florida.
Right. Okay.
Yep. You can go to the next slide if you want to, Mark. And I'm just going to talk real quick, and then you can cut me off, because I think I'm right about time. You can ask, any more questions. But demand response is just something that, in conjunction with the clean energy transition, we as the utility, are going to need to have a closer relationship with our customers. We're going to have to partner more closely than we have in the past in order to keep the grid balanced. And that's just flat out because, when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, it would be very helpful to us to influence the what's going on your side of the meter, influence how much power you need at that moment. So we are developing more programs now to penetrate that opportunity, to develop that so that we can essentially match the supply and the demand. I think Mark had mentioned, maybe that was before we started the presentation, but that's all about grid balance. The supply and the demand must match. If the supply doesn't meet the demand, we get what's called brownouts or blackouts, right? And none of us want that. If the supply exceeds the demand, that's essentially waste. That's energy that's been created that's wasted, and it can be used, and we're looking at this also as a sort of a measure, a tool. There's ways that we can store energy, either through batteries, and electric vehicles are one great way to do that, or ice storage, is another thing where you can create ice, during the time when you've got the wind blowing and the sun shining, and then you can melt the ice to cool your area, when the power is not being generated. So there's things like that. There's all kinds of other things, hydrogen, making hydrogen, using the power when we have it to make something that then we can use later to create power when the renewables are not available. So long story short, a demand response is a critical and growing concern for us. And I think we're all of us as citizens, as users of the grid power, have to be open to, I think, and at least look at the possibility of how can we modify our behaviors, or how can we share some control, maybe to some extent. Gosh, I hate to even use that because we're so many different ways that we're being controlled now, by somebody or something. You hate to give up too much of that, more of it, but in this case, it kind of, to the end, to meet the goal there of balancing the grid and using the resources most efficiently, it makes sense. So it's a part of what we're going to see more of, and I'm sure you're going to see more of it, in the news and whatnot coming forward. But I think that might be the end of there'll be one more slide, some of these, the demand response options. We've had some of these. You might recognize the saver switch. And many of you may already be on that. There's a residential saver switch, right? If you're not using that, I would encourage you to look at it. It's essentially a device that goes on your air conditioning compressor and cycles it on and off when it's really hot and sticky. You don't want to have that on a system that barely keeps up, or you'll get mad at us, right? Because it's going to make your situation worse. But if you've got a good new air conditioner that keeps up well, keeps your house cool anyway, then get on that saver switch, and that essentially lets us cycle, when there's peak essentially pressure on the grid. But more of that is what we're talking about here. Any other questions?
How promising are energy storage technologies? Like
Batteries?
Anything. I mean, what's to be believed and what's realistic?
It's a great question, and I'll answer your question, John, here in a minute too. I see your hand up, but it's very difficult to say because, you're suggesting, say, batteries. We hear a lot of hype about batteries, and battery technology has improved quite a lot. But if you use a battery like on a portable, a tool, a cordless tool, like I do, I use a ton of those things. The life on them, they don't last forever, A, and B, they're really expensive. I mean, it's to that point, I don't know that battery technology, at least my own personal view, and certainly I think from a utility scale, it's not there. It can be useful for shorter duration, type of, of backup, but usually your battery won't last as long as the sun is behind, say we have a couple of days of cloudy weather, right? Battery's never going to last that long unless you have a huge battery. It's very expensive. So that technology has to evolve. And, I think part of it is volume and the batteries in electric vehicles. We're gung ho, as Xcel Energy behind the conversion to electric vehicles. We strongly support that. Part of it, it's not just because people will use more of the power we make. Part of it is that we look at that as the ability to use the underutilized resource by having those things charge when the wind is blowing at night and we got plenty of power we don't know what to do with. So we charge electric cars with it. And the flip side is we may be able to use those cars if people are willing to plug them back into the grid. If they're not driving that next day, use the batteries in the cars to power the grid to help supplement, that. So it's kind of cool, but to say there's a lot of technology that's not yet developed and it needs to be refined and improved before it becomes financially attractive. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, I've seen your wind farms and they're quite extensive all throughout the 5-state area.
Yeah.
And the newest thing now that they've been talking about is having these wind farms offshore. Now, have you guys looked at that at all in terms of like Lake Superior or something like that? I mean, is that an option that you've looked at in terms of providing power to the grid?
I don't know the answer to that, John. I'm just not sure. I'm that's above my pay grade. I'm suspecting that not because we don't have a lot of coastal service area, but not that would stop us,
Right.
I know that we are very rapidly deploying new wind every day. We call that steel for fuel. It's good for us from a variety of different ways to build wind, generating assets. So that's, you'll see in one of those slides earlier, I think I showed how that wind is going to be increasing. It's just going to be a significant percentage already in our plan, to meet the goals. So as far as the offshore stuff, I think that's kind of cool. It's got some application. I bet some advantage, big flat area right where the wind's going to blow like crazy, but maybe hard to maintain. There's always trade-offs. And that's just me thinking out loud.